Fire. All right, Lisa. Welcome back to Trinity Place. My name is Cameron Miller, and this is a sermon for the second Sunday of Epiphany, proper 4, I think. I don't know about you, but I sometimes keep a letter or even a fragment of a letter or some other thing that I've received from a friend or an acquaintance. And then I forget that I have it and it gets lost someplace, and then I unexpectedly find it again. This is one of those unexpected treasures. It's a long ago Christmas letter from someone who is now long gone and who I worked with as a consultant for a number of years in a job and relationship that influenced me greatly. Carl was his name, and he was married a second time to a woman who had been like a surrogate mother to me throughout my high school years. Back then, Carl wasn't in the picture yet. Her name was Mary Helen. Carl's letter shares the news that Mary Helen had developed Alzheimer's disease, which, along with the natural course of aging, required them both to move into a continuing care community. It was before there were so many choices as we have these days, and so they had to move away from Maine to a place which was a place they had retired to and loved deeply. It was one of many losses they had experienced. Carl described a situation in which he had a studio apartment situated about 100 yards away from the skilled nursing center where Mary Helen stayed. Not being together, not sleeping together was another profound loss. So here's what Carl wrote as a description of their life at that time. He wrote, "Needless to say, this has called for a drastic simplification of life, and that's not all bad. It's good to discover again that the necessities of life require very little space. In ways we never realized before, we are finding that when another person is your primary concern, life is not impoverished. It would be more accurate to say it is different, more institutional than we like, sometimes unsettling, but still funny and yes, joyous. This new life challenges me every day. What is Mary Helen trying to say? What does her world look like to her? Well-meaning friends sometimes say that life must be hard now. I wouldn't put it that way. Surprisingly, life here is full. There are days when there isn't even time for a nap. We are faced daily with what it means to be old people, and we are finding that Betty Davis was right when she said, growing old ain't for sissies. Now, please hear Carl. It's good to discover again that the necessities of life require little space. He didn't write, it's so painful to sell and give away all the things we loved and cherished all these years, although without a doubt that must have been painful. Again here, Carl. In ways we never realized before, we are finding that when another person is your primary concern, life is not impoverished. He didn't write, I'm exhausted and beleaguered by the task of being the primary caretaker for my soulmate who is no longer the person she once was. There's no perfuming that pig. It was certainly grievous. And again, let us hear Carl. This new life challenges me every day. It wasn't, why has God abandoned me to this awful life? Even though there must have been many times when Carl felt that lament on his heart. And finally, Carl, one more time. Well-meaning friends sometimes say that life must be hard now. I wouldn't put it that way. Surprisingly, life here is full. He did not write, I deserve better than this, although I knew both Carl and Mary Helen well, and I can tell you they surely did deserve better than that. Now, please do not hear more than I'm saying. This is not about a denial of pain or grief or struggle or loss or deprivation. It's not about denying any of that. There was nothing romantic about Carl and Mary Helen's situation or end of life. Our lives have pain, loss, and deprivation. It is hard duty for every single one of us, at least sometimes. But, and I hesitate to say this knowing some of the very real struggles and grief going on here among us in this community, but it is also what we make of it, how we frame it. Your life and mine is a painting. We paint, we choose the colors and the shapes and the light that reflect the scene. We do not get to choose the canvas. We have little control over how much of what takes place in our lives. But we do get to choose how we frame it. That may not seem like much given that we have to endure, but it is actually hugely determinative. Well-meaning friends say that life must be hard now. I wouldn't put it that way. Surprisingly, life here is full. I met a 91-year-old woman in El Salvador, I'm sure I've told you this, who lost 50 members of her family in one day in a massacre by government troops. At 91, still grieving, of course, she had not given up on life. She had not stopped living her life. She had not stopped hoping for better. She had not stopped working for better. She was poor and carried grief and the likes of which most of us will never know. And she, like Carl, lived a life that was full and full of meaning. She was called. Carl was called. We are called. We are called to frame our lives as a call to love more and to serve more and to give more, to live a life that is full and full of meaning regardless of its circumstances. Now, you don't have to see it that way, of course. We can frame our lives and the circumstances of our lives any other way we want. It's our call. That's the point. It is our call. We think of a calling as a voice or entity from outside of ourselves calling into us to tell us to do something. Maybe sometimes it is like that, but mostly what a calling is how we frame our circumstances, how we paint the canvas, and what meaning we give to it. That's our call. We get it backwards when we listen to these stories like Samuel and romanticize them with gobbledygook church language. We think it's about God's call to us, and we wonder why we don't hear God calling the way Samuel did, or the way Jesus did, or even the way the dragon heard Aslan. But it's not about God's call. It's about our call, how we call it. And that leads us to a confrontation with how you and I see things, how we frame the universe and our little place in it. Is the cosmos a mechanical system of cause and effect that simply controls the well-oiled wheels of unchangeable scientific laws? Or is God present in the very fabric of life, mysterious in substance and action, curious in influence, and capricious lover of souls? Is the universe a spinning orb that is winding up or winding down, but in either case utterly indifferent to the little creatures like us that are speckles on it? Or is the motion and movement of history, whether on our planet or among all of them, moving toward a vision perceived by the Creator, just like the painter moves from an empty canvas to a final place of rest with her art? Is our life a bitch and then you die? Or is it an amazing technicolored code of opportunities to love and to serve and to create change that benefits others? Are we just taking up space in the middle and getting as much stuff as we can before we die? Or are we on a path towards an ever more generous life in which we literally give ourselves away more and more as if an ascending rocket shedding its fuel? Are we hearing and responding to the voices of consumerism who call for our allegiance, the voices of nationalism that demand our loyalty, or the voices of tribe or clan or kin that determine our identity? Or are we hearing and responding to the voices of God whispering to us from the canvas of our lives to cast our vision this way and understand our context that way, and tickling us to consider this or that instead of the frame that we were handed? It is our call, yours and mine. It is how we frame it and nobody else. I say that with terrifying sobriety, knowing that we do not control the circumstances of our lives, except in the efforts we make to shape them. We are all terribly vulnerable, and anything can happen, and always does. But it's not only about what happens. It's also about how we interpret what happens and how we frame it within the canvas of our lives. We want more, of course. We want assurance. We want insurance. We want protection. We want control. We want security. We do not have them. We have instead our own choices and what we do with them and how we frame the whole thing with the larger canvas of our lives. So now I will end this with the truth about that call of Samuel. If all we know is this little bit we just read or heard today, then it might seem like a sweet visit by God to a young boy, Jiminy Cricket to Pinocchio. But the call of Samuel initiates the overthrow of a dynasty that has pretty much run the show for years. It was a dynasty that, like so many other dynasties, had thoroughly succumbed to the lure of materialism, greed, and rejection of God's best dream for this creation. So God gives a shout out to Samuel. Samuel listens and then responds. But when he does, Samuel discovers himself the instrument of subversion, a tool that releases a revolution against the current state of order. Samuel discovers he is to replace a king who has no interest in being replaced. If we listen deeply enough to this story, we hear that God may whisper to us like a butterfly kissing a flower. But the consequences of responding to God may not be quite so peaceful. Carl and Mary Helen died in that continuing care facility, and I'm guessing that Carl did not see Mary Helen's nor his own death as tragedies and a painting in which their choices did not matter and their pain and anguish was the last word. We have a calling, all right, you and I, and it is our call for how we will see our own lives in the naked truth of our circumstances. Does how we see ourselves, our lives, our pain, our grief, our opportunities, our choices enable and empower us to keep loving and keep serving and keep giving? Or does it innervate us and victimize us and send us down a chute of no return? It is our call and our choice. With that, I wish you God's peace. Thanks for being here.